I'm Venus with Galaxy Inc. And for this week's writing tips, I'm going to be talking about preparing to write or building a book from like an outline up. So everybody writes differently. For some people, it's very organic. You sit down and you write like a vague idea of what you want to happen in your book, and then you allow the characters and the story to just kind of control the story. So the book moves and morphs in ways that you didn't even think it was going to go. Maybe you didn't even have an ending in mind. And sometimes that's good. It works well for some stories. Sometimes some stories require a bit more planning. Sometimes that works out good. Sometimes it requires you to erase 3 chapters and have to go back and fix things because the story is going in weird directions that you didn't want it to go. And that's the downside of organic writing. But not every story can happen that way, right? Sometimes we do need to plan a little bit more, especially if you're writing a series. And so I'm going to give you some helpful tips or ideas of how you can kind of plan your book if that's the kind of thing you want to do. So the first thing is outlines. We all learn how to do these in school. Get the A, B, C. When you're first starting an outline for a book, the first thing you need to do is kind of set up the different scenes that you have in your head. So if you have an idea, one of the books I wrote, I had an idea of the character's bio mom would die in the story. And so that was one scene that I had. And then I kind of built the story forwards and backwards from that point because I knew that that would be kind of the midway point in the book. And so I built the story up, what would happen before that moment and what would happen after that moment. And with these scenes that I kind of had in my head, you can also start breaking down sections by ideas rather than just like the scenes that are in your head. So do you have an idea for a linear story, or are you thinking there's going to be some flashbacks? You can kind of put those into this outline, right? If you have an ending, put that in the bottom, So now you have an idea visually, when you look at it, you can see where your story is going to start, some of the beats, and the ending. It's okay if there's blanks in there. It's okay if you don't know, what's going to happen in the middle. You just know that this is what you want to happen at the beginning and this is how you want it to end. And so now you've got to figure out how you're going to get that middle in there. If you're writing nonfiction, outlines are very, very important. You need to have an idea of how you're going to order the information so that it makes sense and ideas are grouped together. So if you're doing something like in parts, you have these different ideas. I do see this one a lot when I'm editing where ideas don't quite flow well from one idea to the next because the author has put like the history and I mentioned this in my last video, the history is like at the end and it should be at the beginning or something like that. So you got to kind of plan that out and really make sure you have an idea in your head. It's okay to keep this very general though. You do not have to go into detail. This can be just a general outline of where you think your book's going to go, because I don't want you to pigeonhole yourself. If you make it so detailed that you feel like you have to follow this outline with every single step, you're going to find that your book is you get stuck a lot because you don't know what to write next, or there's a scene that's missing and you didn't realize it, and now you're stuck writing this outline, and so you don't want to write that scene because it doesn't fit here because you didn't put it in your outline. Just make it general, make it basic, give yourself some beats and flow, but don't worry about it being every single piece of your book in there. Next thing you probably need to work on after you've created some kind of outline, whether it's just a plot outline or character outline, whatever. And I don't know if I should say the next thing because, you could probably do this first, but it's creating a character profile. I know that sometimes we have ideas for books or plots that don't really have a character in mind, and sometimes we have a character and we don't really have a plot. We're like, okay, this is a really interesting character, but what do I do with them? And so I think it kind of depends on what you have. If you have a plot idea and you need to find a character for it, then do your outline first. If you have a really great character, then go ahead and make your character profiles and then work on, an outline for your book. So a character profile is almost like a dating profile. You're going to kind of create who your character is, like as if you were reading about them. Their eye color, their hair color, the names of their parents, their name. Again, it doesn't have to be super detailed, but it's important that you know what your character looks like in your head. I do know some authors will do things like find actors or just pictures in general of characters that kind of look like how they imagine it, and they print those out and they put those up on a board so they can kind of look at it. It gives them an idea, a visual reference or a visual cue of what their character is like. It is important because if you don't have a clear image in your head of what your character looks like and some of these kind of personal details about them, you will find that your character had gray eyes on page 3 and green eyes on page 12 and brown eyes on page 100. And so you need to have a clear idea of what your character looks like. It's okay if that changes, but then you're gonna have to go back and change it throughout. So kind of try to visualize what your character looks like and who they are. And then in this profile, you also want to include their age, what type of clothes they wear, if they're into any particular styles, if their likes or dislikes. Kind of build a person, give them personality traits and things that they enjoy and hobbies and stuff. And that'll give you things that you can kind of like insert into the book. Okay, and remember, not everything that you put in your outline, just like I said, or in your character profiles, they might not make it into the book, but you as the author have an idea of who they are. Then we got to work on a character background. So if you recall in my D&D video where I talk about creating, characters from D&D, you have to create a background for your character, a history. A lot of authors have done this. J.R.R. Tolkien is very popular with his. I mean, this Silmarillion is basically a history that he created for his world and for his characters. So build a history for your characters. They have a life before your book started. What was that life like? Where did they live? What did they do? Did they do any special things? I think that a really fun thing to do with these is to do writing prompts. You write from your character's perspective and, ask them questions, which I know it sounds like we're talking to ourselves as authors, but that's not true. Ask your characters, what is the funniest thing that happened to you when you were little? And then write a little 1-page short story from your character's perspective of something that they did when they were little that they really enjoyed. Or, questions that you would ask, again, dating profile, questions that you would ask on a date possibly. Get to know your character so that you can kind of build this background for them. And again, that stuff might not end up in your book, but you know it as the author, and you can kind of put those layers in there, and you can honestly tell when authors have done this because their character has a life that existed before the story started. And that creates a well-rounded character, and it creates the characters that I enjoy. Then you have to do world building, which is kind of like character background. This world existed before this character did. And you have to define the rules of your world. So this applies to both fantasy and modern contemporary books. Fantasy, of course, you're creating a whole new world with rules and possibly magic or whatever. You need to define those rules. What can the magic do? What can't it do? What are the boundaries? What is the map of this world like? If you're doing more historical fiction, you're going to have to do world building and put your audience into that time period, which requires a lot of work the farther back you go, as opposed to more modern history. Define those rules. What were people allowed to do and what weren't they allowed to do? What was common? You have to build that up, but you have to put that. So that's part of the research of going into a book, starting that research process. If you're setting a book now and it's a children's book and the characters live in New Jersey, is there places that the children aren't allowed to go to? Maybe they break that rule, but are there places that they're not allowed? Are there things that they're not supposed to do? Define the rules of your world and the history of it, and the character's history within that. And then you can also do storyboarding. I'm not an artist, so I don't do storyboarding, but if your book is going to be more visual if you imagine it as a graphic novel, or if you plan on it being not just a book but a movie. If it helps you to do storyboarding, create a storyboard, use index cards or, a board, and kind of, plot your book out using visuals. I know that sometimes storyboarding can just be stick figures. So if that makes you happy, some people really need to sketch that out visually in order to see it. I took a book, and I've talked about this before, but I was having trouble with the pacing of the book. It felt kind of off. So I took each chapter and wrote on an index card what happened in each chapter, kind of like the beats of the chapter, the different scenes. And then I kind of laid them all out, and I reordered them so that the beats felt more linear, and there was actually a flashback in there, and I could add that in there, and the story. And then when I went back in to revise, I kind of patched it back together and fixed the pacing, and it was so much better when I did this. But that was my way of kind of creating a storyboard. I didn't draw pictures, but I wrote on index cards. And then you've got your plotting. So once you've done all this, once you've got your outline, you've got character profiles and character backgrounds and world building and storyboards, then you can go in and fill in the things that were missing in your outline, the things that you weren't so sure about, because now you should have a better idea of your characters and where they're going to go and what they're going to do and their history, and it might help define your book a little bit better. Not saying that everything will be filled in, and again, I still think you should keep it general because you need to let your story breathe a little bit. But once you've done this, it feels like the missing pieces are kind of been added in. I have outline books, some better than others. And there's some that I abandoned the outline altogether and had to start a new one. So kind of halfway through, like, oh, okay. I do think outlines are especially important for series, because you need to know where your story is going for the next book. And you don't want to just drop in new information. And this is especially important when you're talking about the world building and character backgrounds that you didn't mention. So one of the things that drives me nuts sometimes in series is you'll be in the 4th book and the author drops some random information in, and you're like, wait, where'd that come from? That wasn't mentioned in any of the 3 books before that, and it feels like it came out of nowhere. Well, it's because the author didn't think of it when they were writing the 1st book or the 2nd book or the 3rd book. They just thought of it in the 4th book. And if they had done a little bit more planning with backgrounds and world building and their magic, they might have put a little bit of that in the 1st book so that it doesn't feel so contrived by the time you get to book 4 when it's needed. Then the last thing, and this is the most important thing about preparing to write, is that you need to give yourself a deadline, because you could sit there and write character profiles and backgrounds and all. You could just keep doing it for forever. You could research and research and research. I love researching, so you could just keep going. I know somebody once who, was like, yeah, I've been working on this book, and we're like, oh yeah, like, how's it going? They hadn't written a word of the book, but what they did have was this huge book, and inside was like pictures of their character and like color swatches for their clothes, and it was really, really, really detailed. They had all the details, but they couldn't write the book, and they couldn't write the book because they couldn't stop building this book, which was not a book. And because they had done so much research, there was no longer the freedom to write. That was gone because they were so now encumbered by these color swatches for what their character had to wear. And that wasn't the important part. That wasn't what was important to the story. I do think it's important to kind of know where your story is going. I don't think you need to know the ending right away, but I just caution people that when they start the process and when they're building their characters and building their worlds, that they just not get so bogged down in it to the point where their story never gets written. And all they've got is a very large notebook with full of things that they were going to do that they never did. And I think a really good example of this is, I think of Jodorowsky's Dune. Jodorowsky is a French filmmaker who is going to create a adaptation of Dune, and he had created all this conceptual art, and he had people on board, and I mean, he had gotten it more than off the ground, right? He had kind of written an outline for the book, and he just couldn't get it off the ground completely. Because he got so bogged down in the details and who was going to play what parts and who was going to be in it, and you know what the storyboard and the story art was and all that stuff, but it never got made because it just kept going on and on and on. And then one of the actors died who was going to play one of the characters, and it just kind of fell apart because he was so busy building it that it never got done. For the record, as a Dune fan, I think the movie that he was going to create would have probably been pretty terrible. but it is an example of things that just never get off the ground. And there's a whole bunch of movies out there like that, and books. There's a lot of books sitting in people's drawers that never became books because they got so bogged down with the details. So instead of being like a Jodorowsky, we need to be like J.R.R. Tolkien and create these backgrounds and histories and then write the actual book. Don't forget to press like and subscribe to my channel. I post new writing tip videos almost every Friday. I've been Venus with Galaxy Ink. I hope your writing is out of this world.